So today I'm going to be talking about Mermaid Isle lore, more specifically about the Selkies. I didn't realise they would get rid of Selkies altogether, but that doesn't really change any of my thoughts. I've just been sitting on this for a while because it's quite a lot. So what stuck out to me was the name of the Selkies. And they stood out to me because I realised they were generally either Welsh or Irish. And I recognised a few because I recently did some coursework that involved like Celtic mythology, more specifically women in Britain. But up to this point, like Mermaid Isle's lore is generally rooted in Greek mythology. But in my first Mermaid Isle lore video, I did mention that Selkies were a part of like Scottish folklore, which is somewhat true since there is heavy links between Welsh, Scottish and Irish folklore and Celtic mythology generally in the British Isles and Ireland. I don't think that the little Selkies in the games experience the exact things that their fairy and mythological counterparts experienced. A lot like how I don't believe that the characters named after the 9 muses from Greek mythology experienced the same things as the 9 muses in Greek mythology. They're just more of like a metaphor for like how music is like equated to power and astrology and stuff. But still, the links of their names to mythology is still an interesting thing to talk about, and I've kind of been sleeping on this video because I don't really know how to link it to the wider lore, but I'm gonna do this anyways. I've also searched up how to pronounce most of the Irish names, so if my pronunciation is wrong, blame Google, not me. Well, the first name that stuck out to me was Branwen, because that's an obviously Welsh name, and I knew that came up in the Mabinogion. So I started collecting all the names of the Selkies, and I'm pretty sure there are exactly 16 names that they could have. I really highly doubt that I missed any, but I could have. So Owen, Tagwyn, Ronan, Eva, Logara, and Fergus all appear in Irish mythology and Celtic mythology in some way. Llewellyn, Iestyn, Branwen, and Gladys appear in Welsh legends, and the exceptions to this are Ava and Davi, which are Gaelic versions of the names Eve and David, which are from the Bible obviously, like as in Adam and Eve and David and Goliath, which could be suggesting something about original sin and how that links to the spread of evil, disharmony in the context of Mermaid Isle. And in David and Goliath it's about the victory of the underdog, which could be a reference to the war between seahorses and lionfish, which we now know after the Disharmony Rising update that the seahorses were the underdogs since they had to lock Viscoria away in like an alternate dimension to win the war. But I find it doubtful that this very niche detail of 2 Selkie names says like so much about the lore. I think it's just my brain trying to make connections. But anyways, other exceptions are Agnish, which is an Irish name, and Barabal, which is a Scottish name. They're both linked to saints, but that's kind of not relevant in the context of the Mermaid Isle lore. And Kapi, which is literally not linked to anything, so it's like an actual exception. I just thought they'd think it would be cute for a seal, I guess. And I almost forgot to mention that Catriona doesn't actually appear in Irish mythology, but appears in fictional works about Selkies, so it's kind of worth mentioning, but I'll get into that later. I'm not going to do a deep dive into all of the names, because that will literally take forever, and this video is already long as is, so there will be sections of names that I will focus on, and I'm going to more specifically focus on ones that directly link to Selkies, then ones that have some sort of link to water. Broad, I know, but like these names were kind of picked out with care, so I think it's a bit rude to ignore the ones that have links to water because they might have some relevance. The name Ronan means little seals, and this comes from the legend of the Selkies in Irish mythology, where a female Selkie washes ashore and a fisherman steals her seal skin when she's in her human form. She then lives as his wife and they have children together, which are called Ronans, since they are the babies like Selkies, so the little seals. But eventually she finds her seal skin and returns to the water. I'm not sure how to link this to the lore of Mermaid Isle, but it's clearly a legend that directly addresses Selkies, which shows the intentions of the creators of Mermaid Isle in choosing the names for the Selkies. I guess you could link this to us directing the Selkies home, because they are going back to where they belong, like the mother Selkie in this legend. Okay, so Catriona. So basically this name is used in like some sort of Selkie fanfic, but I don't actually want to talk about it. Originally I was going to talk about this, but there was like use of AI pictures and that just gives me the ick. It has little mythological basis and relevance, but in a broader sense, this name is often used in fiction for the mother Selkie in the previous legend, so that's probably why Mermaid Isle would choose it as a name for a Selkie, because at first glance this name is associated with Selkies. Let's talk about the other water links. Branwen is linked to the sea because she is the daughter of a god of the sea, Lear. In the Mabinogion, she gets married to the King of Ireland, but her weird brother mutilates his horses, I don't really know why, and her other brother, who is the King of Wales, compensates him with a cauldron of rebirth. This comes up later. But after Branwen faces abuse in Ireland, her brother sends the Welsh army, and long story short, the Welsh win, but with only 7 people left, and the Irish revive their men with the cauldron of rebirth, and Branwen dies of a broken heart. The obvious link to Mermaid Isle lore is Branwen being the daughter of the sea god, but the war in her story also has some similarities to the war between the seahorses and the lionfish, since the seahorses, like the Welsh army, won the war by a small margin, and the lionfish army are kind of in limbo, so they're not dead, which has some similarities to the Cauldron of Rebirth. Also, the death of Branwen kind of links to the madness in the Seahorse Prince, since it's kind of implied that the Seahorse Prince's madness is gonna lead to his downfall, and Branwen died because of a broken heart. So their demise is very linked to their mentality. But honestly, I think any sort of war could be linked with the Seahorse and Lionfish war. But either way, I think there's some interesting links between the two stories. Logora is linked to the water because he goes on an expedition to save a fairy's wife and has to travel to the other world through a lake. That's very summarized, but it's a pretty loose connection. And many of these names are just Irish, Scottish or Welsh because of the origins of the Selkie legend. But I think it is interesting to consider the sea as a gateway to another world, like how in combat mode we are transported to some kind of limbo for the Disharmony warriors, which is a separate reality to the normal Mermaid Isle, as well as when we guide the Selkies to their gate, which transports them back to where they came from, which is the Arctic, which we can only assume is in another realm or there's some sort of teleportation, but it's not within the realm of Mermaid Isle. This can also be seen in the animal helping task, where you help the ancient fish build its ancient gate, which it teleports through, which we can only assume sends it to some sort of ancient other realm, which anyways, you get my point. Okay, so Fergus is the King of Ireland, and he's sleeping on the shore until he's snatched by sea sprites. He wakes up and captures them, and in return for their freedom, they grant him some wishes. He wishes to be able to breathe underwater. They accept this wish, but with an exception of one lake, but he decides to swim there anyways, and his face gets disfigured by a monster. Because of this, his court has to hide his face for 7 years. This eventually comes to light, so because of his pride, he returns to fight the monster. Whilst he does kill the monster, he dies of exhaustion doing this. Not gonna lie, I have no idea how to link this to the Mermaid Isle lore, but his name is linked to a water-based story, so it seemed relevant. I could link this to how the mind can lead to disaster. For example, Fergus was a bit cocky, a bit prideful, so he swam in a forbidden lake, which led to his doom, whereas the Seahorse Prince and other warriors like Melepone went mad or got corrupted, which led to their demise. But even I think this is a stretch. So anyways, I don't think a small detail like one specific name realistically says a significant amount about the lore, but I just wanted to make this video to highlight Mermaid Isle's attention to detail when it comes to the lore. Like, they didn't have to give Selkies names, but they did, and the majority of them have mythological relevance, which is always a positive for me. At the end of the day, I think they chose these names because they were Welsh and Irish, and Selkies come from Irish and British folklore, but it's nice to see how these stories link to the lore of Mermaid Isle anyway, even if this isn't the intention of the creators of the lore. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.